Okay, for the English-speaking people that might have come to this video for the interview, I want to say sorry about my wonky English. I was having some camera problems before the time for the interview to begin, and I got really nervous because I was losing time for the interview because of my wonky camera. You'll see that the camera image, my camera image, is very dark and it's very wonky. So I got pretty nervous about it, so my English got pretty wonky. But I hope you can understand me. I'll put a little disclaimer in Portuguese and then we can go to the interview. Agora, pra galera que fala português, não estou deixando vocês na mão. Eu, como eu falei já em inglês, né? Tive um probleminha com a câmera na hora da entrevista, tava nervosa para um caramba porque a minha câmera resolveu não funcionar. Mas tudo bem, deu tudo certo no final das contas, né? E assim, novamente queria agradecer a Blizzard, aos CMs, né, a Nico e a Dai, de terem cedido pra gente a oportunidade de entrevistar os dois devs de World of Warcraft Cataclisma Clássico. Para quem não conhece eles, a Nora Valleta, ela é Lead Software Engineer, engenheira líder de software do Clássico. Ela já fez uma entrevista com a gente pelo Season of Discovery, né? Sempre um prazer falar com ela. E o Kris Zierhut é o principal game designer, né? O designer de jogo principal, líder, né? Então a gente teve a oportunidade de entrevistar esses dois devs falando sobre o Cataclisma Clássico. Como foi uma entrevista que saiu depois do lançamento do Cataclisma Clássico, né? Eu deixei de fazer algumas perguntas em relação ao que tá vindo, porque afinal de contas a gente já viu, né? E joguei um pouquinho mais para a parte de tecnicidades e também um pouquinho do que foi a experiência de fazer o Cataclisma Clássico, né? De trazer o Cataclisma Clássico de volta, né? E sem mais delongas, né? Without further ado, let's get to the interview. Hello, I'm Dorna. I'm from Brazil. We have a channel called Coffee in Suramar, Café em Suramar, and we focus most in World of Warcraft, right? And a little of retail, a little of classic, a little of season of discovery. I believe I have already talked with Nora. We have talked before, right?
Right.
And now in Cataclysm Classic, you know.
Right.
I would like to straight ahead say sorry about my pronunciation if I speak something wrong. It's not
No
my
problem.
native language. And I want to say thank you very much for giving us the opportunity for this interview. It's a great opportunity, especially for us in Latin America, to talk with you guys here.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm Kris Zierhut. I'm a principal game designer. I've worked on World of Warcraft off and on since 2005. I was actually on the team from 2005 to 2016, working on class and system design. Worked in a few other areas around Blizzard and came back to Classic for Wrath of the Lich King Classic. I'm working on it, stimmed through that, and on Season of Discovery and now Cataclysm.
Yeah, I'm Nora Valleta. I'm one of our lead software engineers on WoW Classic. I've been with the team through the launch of Wrath of the Lich King Classic, Hardcore, Season of Discovery, and now Cataclysm Classic. I feel very happy and fortunate to be here. Love the team.
Thank you very much. Well, without further ado, I want to start saying that for us here in Brazil, Cataclysm is was a very important expansion when it came from retail, because when the game was localized, it was translated to Portuguese. So many Brazilian players got to know World of Warcraft thanks to Cataclysm. So it was their first expansion, right? So it was very nostalgic to me to know that Cataclysm coming back. And it was a bit of surprise, you know. I'm sure you've read the questions beforehand, right? And that's the thing. We all wondered where's the classic starts, where the classic stops, right? So I think I would start with this question because it's one that we hear a lot of people asking.
Yeah,
Sorry?
I think you're a fantastic illustration of answering that question, because for you, classic was Cataclysm. Sometimes we're challenged, like, is Cataclysm really part of the classic experience? And what we've learned over the last almost 5 years on the classic project is that everybody has a different view of what is classic. For some people, classic is only that 2004 experience that they have, the original, right? And for some people, it's Burning Crusade. For some people, it's Wrath of the Lich King. For you, it's Cataclysm, right? So different people have different experiences. And what we've been trying to do with the classic team and classic projects is let everybody play World of Warcraft the way they want to play it, right? So we have Cataclysm Classic for those people who remember it fondly and have nostalgia for it, or who have a fantastic guild or raid team that they want to keep playing with, and this lets them continue forward with those characters and those relationships that people have been building since 2019. These relationships we forged during the pandemic and kept going and still play together with those friends on a weekly basis. And for other people, they want to play classic era, and that's great. Or they want to see the crazy new ideas we have in Season Discovery, or they want to play hardcore or hardcore self-found mode. So offering the full possibilities, everybody gets to play WoW the way they want to play WoW. That's the ideal.
Yeah, our team is made up of, we're players, we're individuals, and we all have our own personal experiences. That being said, like Kris said, we don't want to kind of prescribe to players. Like if we as a team start drawing that line, we don't want players to start to think, oh well, I shouldn't consider this classic, or I shouldn't enjoy playing this game mode. We never want that to happen. We really do organically just want our players to play what they have the most fun playing. And, we're really excited about Cataclysm Classic as a team.
So, yeah, you kind of answered my question already, but I'll get a follow-up question. Sorry. So are you planning to going forward with the expansions in the classic servers? So we'll probably in the not so close future have a Warlords of Draenor Classic or a Dragonflight Classic?
Hard to say. So we don't have any specific plans right now, right, Nora? Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Nothing to announce regarding our future plans. We just, I feel like in the words of lead software engineer Ana Resendez, I think she said this at BlizzCon 2023, but we truly appreciate and thank our players for taking this journey with us as we venture forth into the mysterious future.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So what our players want is what most likely we're going to give. That's what you can count on. Enough players want it, it'll happen.
Many players are hoping for a Mist of Pandaria Classic very near.
But in the meantime, you can try it out, right?
Yeah.
Dragonflight's doing the Pandaria remix, so you can go back and touch a little bit in the nostalgia. And I think that experience will be fun and enjoyable for players who've been playing Dragonflight as you go back. But I think it's only going to whet their appetite, and they're going to want more of being in the middle of Pandaria. That's my expectation.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different experience to kind of like go from modern and go revisit classic areas that were available in the game before, because you're using still those new modern systems. It's the modern game. Everything looks and feels different. It's definitely a different feeling when you're experiencing that expansion as though it is the latest tier of content,
All right. And about the classic version of Cataclysm, is there something that differs from the original expansion Cataclysm? There was something that you that we can expect for it to be different from what it was back when we had the original one?
Yeah, there's a few notable differences. I would say perhaps the biggest is our changes to guild advancement in Cataclysm Classic. So original Cataclysm, we introduced a guild progression system, which we think as a team that original system may have incentivized leaving your smaller, more closely knit guild in order to join a larger, maybe more detached guild, missing that sense of community. Just in order to get those perks, those rewards. And so we did away with that system as it was known back then, and made, some of the earnable guild perks back then baseline to just being part of a guild. Some are earnable via guild reputation. We think that these changes are going to hopefully help better support the social fabric of the game. So For example, one of the changes we made is there was this perk called cash flow in original Cataclysm. And it was where whenever you loot money from an enemy, you'd get it would generate an additional 10% on top of that and then automatically deposit it into your guild bank. But unfortunately, what ended up happening, like that was a really cool feature. But a lot of people thought, oh, okay, well, if I go start up my own guild, I can just invite a bunch of random players, and then while they're leveling, they'll just make me all this money. And so the guild masters would maybe funnel money, through that perk, just so they can kind of make a bunch of money off of people who are just trying to level and play the game. So we did end up removing that perk in particular, and ultimately, at the end of the day, we want guilds to kind of be a focal point of interpersonal connection, a means for moving together toward one or more shared goals, right? We want to make sure that that's the reason players want to join into a guild with one another, and we're not necessarily incentivizing huge mega guilds that are just kind of detached and you don't really know each other,
Yeah,
I remember that perk.
Back in 2010, when the guild system had just launched, we started to realize this problem was happening, that we had accidentally, inadvertently caused people want to be in giant guilds instead of small guilds. And these small guilds were disbanding and falling apart. And we immediately regretted it. It was hard to repair the damage after it was done. We knew it was an obvious misstep. We made changes in Mists of Pandaria to try to deal with it. In Mists of Pandaria, it was much easier to level up your guild because we wanted every guild to be able to get to level 20 and unlock all the perks, but the damage had kind of already been done. So when we knew it would have been this kind of misstep, why repeat that? Instead, we reworked the system. So now when you unlock those perks by your reputation with the guild, and your reputation advances from just playing with your friends and doing stuff together. It doesn't matter how big your guild is. It matters how devoted to your guild you are, which is really what we wanted out of it in the first place. Along the way, we did, like Nora mentioned, get rid of the perk cash flow. There was also one called Have Guild Will Travel that lets you teleport your entire guild to one place. And we had come to regret that. And so Mists of Pandaria had been taken out. So once again, we took it out for Cataclysm Classic. It kind of shrank the world to a much smaller space. We, for Cataclysm, have completely rebuilt Kalimdor and Eastern Kingdoms, all new terrain, all new quests, all new spawning, and players are just teleporting from the capital city to the dungeon and back again without actually seeing it. So it couldn't really serve the work that we had just done and seeing this spectacular world. It didn't make sense to keep it. Or another similar one was there was a mass resurrection perk that existed in Cataclysm. And we didn't exactly get rid of it, but we changed it to a version that exists in later versions of World of Warcraft, where instead of there being a mass resurrection perk for guilds, every class that has the ability to resurrect players has their own unique flavor of a mass resurrection spell, because we want to keep that as something that belongs to the class and is their unique contribution. And for warlocks, their unique contribution was summoning people instead of having this teleport. So those are little changes to the guild system that were made in later expansions and felt like they belonged in the Cataclysm expansion as well.
You kind of answered my next question, actually.
Sorry.
No, not problem at all, actually. There was something I asked, actually two. One of them was, is there something from the original system of Cataclysm that needed to change so it was possible to bring back to the classical servers? Right? And you already said that.
Yes, this was one of them. I can talk about another one we considered but decided not to do, which was there were some people who were really sad that the talent system changed between Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm. So Cataclysm has an all-new talent system. Instead of getting one talent point every level from level 10 on, you got one every other level. It's starting at 80, you got one every level. But essentially, it was fewer talent points, whole new talent trees. Lots of talents were removed, new talents were created. And some people were like, oh, I wish we had the original talent system. While we were in development, we were like, well, we still have the design documents for the original. So during Cataclysm, we were originally planning to have the original talent system. We only changed partway through development. We actually had all the design documents that you could have rebuilt those talent trees that had a talent point every single level. But it would have meant making a lot of changes. You'd have to create all new talents, change how the talents work, change how they interacted, make sure the class mechanics work with it. And it would have meant changing the classes so much that what we would have ended up with would not have actually been Cataclysm Classic. It would have been some alternate, Season of Discovery style version of an alternate Cataclysm Classic. And so the realization was, no, if we really want to deliver that experience of Cataclysm Classic, we should leave the talent tree system alone, even though that was one that we thought a lot about changing. It didn't make sense to do in the spirit of recreating the experience as it was.
That would be how that would be different for sure.
It would be a big undertaking.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people being pretty mad about it, but I can see a lot of people being actually happy about it. Yeah.
Right. So it's not the right thing for a classic expansion, but it's the right thing maybe for a seasonal experience at some point in the future, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. That answered the one that, are there any new feature of adjustments specifically tailored for the classic version of Cataclysm to enhance the nostalgic experience for veteran players?
So, and this might seem a little boring, but I kind of want to go back to the guild thing. So I submit that probably the most significant change we made, and that's to the guild advancement, is also something I believe will most enhance the nostalgic experience for veteran players. The classic World of Warcraft feel means that a lot of different, it can mean a lot of different things depending on who you ask. Typically when, we as players think back on our fondest memories of these expansions, we remember these moments where, for example, we venture into the Firelands with our friends. Galarin the Druid, Raz the Death Knight, that one guy who always accidentally auto runs off of a cliff and dies. And we overcome obstacle after obstacle together until that final moment where we think we're about to defeat Ragnaros, and all of us in unison start screaming and cheering over voice chat when Ragnaros emerges from the lava in this epic moment. He's got feet for some reason. We know things are about to get serious. Yeah. And, there's something incredibly important in that memory I just shared with you. And that's the people we're experiencing it with, right? I guess this is my long-winded way of saying my hope is that these changes that we've made, to guilds and Cataclysm Classic, and just the changes we've made in general, help support and maintain the social fabric of the game. Because, it depends on who you ask, but to me personally, that's an incredibly big deal in World of Warcraft. I believe World of Warcraft is an incredibly social game, and we all really want to make sure that folks are diving in, having fun, and building those connections with one another, building those memories, those stories.
Yeah, funny enough, my most vivid memory from Cataclysm was when my guild got together to get enough potions made to get the cauldron in the guild perks.
Yeah.
It was quite an event in the guild. Let me see here. What were the main challenges in bringing Cataclysm to the classic version of World of Warcraft? There was some challenge in bringing, or it was something actually pretty natural to you? Like, let's just take the model of the game here and put it here. Let's pick a little, and yeah, it's ready to go.
I wish it were that easy.
Yes.
So I mean, and I'm sure Kris would agree. The act of creating an expansion from scratch for the very first time, and the act of reviving a classic expansion from 14 years ago in this case, we essentially have original data from Wrath, original data from Cataclysm, and then we have the kind of updated change data from Wrath Classic. And since we've made a lot of adjustments to Wrath Classic from the original, we try our best to essentially smartly perform like a three-way merge on completely different data sets, right? And this is static data, things like spells, spawns, items. And so when we do this, we run into obstacles where, the data is structured completely differently now. And so, it takes a long time to kind of examine and transform that data into something that kind of works together. And so for the various versions of WoW Classic, we implement a lot of classic specific functionality. But in order to accomplish these incredible results of a team, we also end up sharing a lot of code with modern WoW wherever it makes sense. One example of this in Cataclysm Classic is the guilds backend. So behind the scenes, there's some areas in the game where it doesn't really make sense to necessarily write and maintain two completely different versions of code that are functionally supposed to be the exact same. And so we've tried our very best to predict, to make smart decisions about when and where we share that code, as well as when it makes sense to, write bespoke solutions based on the original implementation. Sometimes, I hear you say it. I hear players go, "Yeah, well, we had this feature before, like it worked this way before. Couldn't the devs just like copy this over? It's easy." And I think to myself, I wish it were that easy. I promise. I really wish it were that simple, but it does actually, some of these obstacles grow in complexity over time, as we've kind of delivered, TBC, Wrath of the Lich King, and now Cataclysm Classic. And so we've kind of been making a lot of improvements to our workflow and trying our very best to make sure that we're doing things optimally such that we can get things into our players' hands so they can dive in and have fun.
There's a few particularly challenging points with the data and the functionality. One is that Cataclysm has a lot of features in classes and combat and how abilities work that didn't exist in the 2004 version of the game. But the modern version had stopped using it. And so sometime around Legion or Battle for Azeroth, they took the code out. So there would be things that we needed to have work that didn't work in either end of the spectrum. And essentially, we had to recreate them and rebuild them. And finding those specific issues. Oh, this spell is all built correctly, but the thing that it's supposed to do isn't hooked up to any code. So it does nothing, right? Identifying all those types of problems. Or conflicts, where we made a change in Burning Crusade or Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and it conflicted with a data change in Cataclysm, and so now we have to resolve that conflict and figure out how to do it. A good example of that is the spell Prayer of Mending, a priest spell. Due to some of the ways the engine worked, it had to be completely rebuilt in the Burning Crusade Classic to get rid of some of its bugs. That meant that I had to rebuild it every time. When we get to Wrath of the Lich King Classic, got to rebuild Prayer of Mending. Get to Cataclysm, got to rebuild Prayer of Mending. And along the way, the classes are getting more complex. There's more interactions. It gets harder to do that rebuild each time. So resolving those kinds of little data conflicts was a lot of the work we had to do. You couldn't just, merge it all and ship it. Yeah, if you do that, it just doesn't work.
You can just take the city and, okay, let's take it and put it place.
Right.
Oh, okay. Back to what Kris said about the revamped words, I will bring this question here about the faster leveling experience that was announced. Will it be something like Joyous Journey, increasing the sorry, I'm sorry, I'm nervous. The experience received from 60 to 80, keeping 1 to 60 like at the normal pace, so you kind of make the players journey and visit all the revamped places? Or are you planning to make it the faster leveling from 1 to 80?
So the 1 to 60 part, I don't think we did a lot to speed up. There was, like, Cataclysm as it was did speed up the 1 to 60 on its own. Like those were changes we made the first time around to over the course of expansion to make it a little bit faster. But 60 to 80, we particularly spread up more because we wanted people who had dropped off at any point during the classic experience from 2019 till now, who want to come back and play with their friends, to be able to get back into the flow very, very quickly. So they should be able to go in a level very quickly, get kept with their friends, get to level 80, and now be able to go to Mount Hyjal or Vashir together. That's sort of the goal of having that faster leveling experience.
Awesome. You announced there were announcements of a new dungeon difficulty system on Cataclysm. How will that work? On Classic Wrath, you brought the Heroic Plus dungeon system, right? Will it be the same for Kaza, or planning something brand new?
So the Cataclysm dungeon and raid system is very similar to what Wrath of the Lich King had at the end. I worked on Wrath of the Lich King the first time around, and every single patch we changed the way dungeons and raids worked a little bit because we were trying to figure out what the best design was. If you think back to how Wrath of the Lich King started, it started at the beginning with there was a 10 and 25 difficulty on each raid, and the 25 difficulty was called heroic. By the time we got to Icecrown Citadel at the end, there's a 10 player size and a 25 player size, and a 10-player heroic and a 25-player heroic, it was a completely transformed system from where it started. And so Cataclysm is not like that, and it will be a consistent system the whole way through, mirroring how Icecrown Citadel was to work the same way as that. Heroic dungeons work the same way they did in Wrath of the Lich King in the first patch, where there's a normal version and a heroic version. It's possible, no promises, that we will consider putting in a system like the Titan Rune dungeon system if we feel like dungeons need that extra emphasis moving forward, so they keep taking a central role in how players play. We don't know yet if that'll be needed. So it's possible we make that addition. We're also very unlikely to change any of the item levels like we did with Ulduar, because since the itemization and raid philosophy was consistent through Cataclysm, it didn't have the bumpy hiccups that Wrath of the Lich King had, so we didn't feel like we needed to fix those problems again. So it should be much smoother with fewer changes than what Wrath of the Lich King had.
On the topic of the, I know some players have been asking around Titan Rune dungeons in particular, and so it's just a little bit more on the Titan Rune dungeons thing. Titan Rune dungeons were created in Wrath of the Lich King Classic in order to keep dungeons relevant throughout Wrath Classic and to provide a good catch-up mechanic. And so that being said, in Cataclysm, there's pretty good gear progression throughout the expansion, especially with the rise of the Zandalari and rewards from its, 2 heroic dungeons. So we don't want to end up like committing to Titan Rune dungeons too early on, or committing to making significant changes, because we don't want to solve a problem that doesn't necessarily exist yet. We want to make sure that we're making changes where they're most prudent.
We want to make sure people are still doing dungeons, and they only need to do that if people decide, well, dungeons aren't relevant anymore. Okay, we got to do something to make them stay relevant. That'd be the reason.
Fair enough. I remember back when Cataclysm first came, the dungeons, they were pretty hard, the heroic modes.
Yeah.
Are we getting the original hard heroic modes or the nerfed version?
So Cataclysm Classic is based on the data from the final patch of the original Cataclysm, which was 4.3.4. So it contains the nerfed version, so to speak, of the initial dungeons and raids. When we were first developing that in 2009, we thought, hey, we loved how hard heroic dungeons were in Burning Crusade. Let's try to make them hard again like that. Lich King heroics were a little too easy. That was our design team philosophy towards it, and the same towards the raids. And it turned out the player audience had evolved since then, and that wasn't really what the players want. So it was a big shock to the players when the dungeons were suddenly much harder than what they expected. So that was another key example of a misstep where we made a poor design as a development team back in 2009. No reason to repeat that mistake. So we're keeping things at the difficulty they were changed to in the first patch.
I remember as a player, I went into Grim Batol for the first time with my friends, my little group of friends, and we just kept wiping on trash. We got to the first boss. We were suffering. It was fun, but it was pretty brutal.
That's how Burning Crusade dungeons were. That's what we were shooting for.
Yeah, so, we had to make strategies to make the trash.
But Lich King dungeons weren't, and so it was hard to change what players' expectations were after they changed.
Fair enough. Let me see here. Are you planning to launch Looking for Raid from the beginning of Cataclysm, or will be holding it until Dragon Soul?
So as you probably recall, in original Cataclysm, Looking for Raid was introduced in that Dragon Soul raid tier. We actually, as of right now, do not have any plans to introduce Looking for Raid to Cataclysm Classic. That's not to say that we won't necessarily consider adding it in. We'll continue listening to our players and their feedback that they're giving us. But yeah, we don't have any plans of doing so at this time.
I think Looking for Dungeon, Looking for Raid, they sound like they're very similar features, so they kind of get conflated together, but they're serving two very, very different needs. Looking for Dungeon helps with people who are like, I can't find enough people to go do this dungeon. Like, I want to do this level 30 dungeon. There's not enough level 30 people on right now. I can't do it. Looking for Dungeon helps them form those groups. And so it makes a lot of the level up content of dungeon content stay relevant and playable the whole way through. And without Looking for Dungeon, it's often very hard to find groups to do those. It lets people who love running dungeons run a lot of dungeons. We think that's great. Raids, however, are a lot more about, as we talked about, the social experience of WoW, of finding a good guild, of finding a good raid team, and working together with a team and building that team cohesion of this great social experience. And looking for raid isn't addressing that. It's more about, hey, so you're not in a serious guild and you don't have any friends. We'll let you go still see the raid, but you don't have that commitment. So we don't think it has as much of a need. We think an entirely different type of player might want it, but it's possible that we don't need it all with the kind of players we have in Classic. So we'll see what players want.
I must say, yes, thank you very much. I will tell you. That's something that I miss the most from the Classic time, you know, back in the day when you were like in Orgrimmar or Stormwind calling, looking for raids and checking everybody's equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was fun. I liked it. I am weird. we had that line in our server. We had that line before the Dwarven District fountain that we were checking everybody before inviting to our raids. Yeah. It was funny.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Guys, I think we have time for one more quick question.
Oh gosh, already?
One more.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Sorry, we talk so much.
Oh no, I like it. I like it. I guess the final question should be that, do you have any message of word of excitement to share with the Classic WoW community eagerly waiting the launch of Cataclism Classic?
Ooh. I can't wait to play with you all. I can't wait to make my way through these zones. You know, like there's a lot of really fun quests. There's a lot of really fun moments. Like I know, you know, as you're writing, like, you know, you're entering Vashj'ir for the first time and you're hit with that deeply, you know, emotional, atmospheric music that really gives you this sense of, oh no, I'm about to be sent to the bottom of the ocean. There are a lot of, I think, really incredible magical moments in Cataclysm Classic that I'm just incredibly excited for our players to experience.
And I'm most excited about all the new quest content. Again, we completely redid all of Kalimdor, all of Eastern Kingdoms. Areas that used to have almost nothing are now all full of quests and creatures and adventures to have. And the great thing is, you can actually go on those adventures today. You don't even have to wait for Monday. That stuff's already unlocked. And I think it's one of the most exciting and often overlooked aspects of Cataclysm is there's a whole new world of Warcraft to go and explore. And players should get on it. Make a new level 1 character and go see that through the eyes of a low-level character.
There's a quest where you can punch Deathwing in the face.
Yeah, I love that one. I love that one. The day Deathwing came.
Yes,
one of the best quests ever made. Yep.
Yes, I agree.